Hey everyone, it's Michael here at Phacilitate, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Phacilitate Talks. This week's episode is the first in a two-part series featuring Lance Holland of Bluebird Bio and Nina Bauer at MilliporeSigma. And it became a two-part series because we got to the end of our allocated time for the first episode, and the conversation was just fantastic, and we were adamant that we just had to roll this into a two-parter and come back and revisit the conversation. So we talk about everything from manufacturing, vectors, and we also talk about inclusion and diversity within the biotech community, as well as the conference space as well. It's one of the best episodes that I've been a part of, and I really hope you enjoy it. And another thank you to Anthony, Nina, and Lance for being a part of this show. So without further ado, I'm going to roll on the show. Hope you enjoy it.
We're in the middle of doing process validation runs, PPQ runs for a viral vector manufacturing. And, you know, the process that we run, it's with a CMO. They're doing the actual manufacturing, and we're overseeing it as the sponsor. And they're in the EU and we're in the US, and everyone's homebound, right? And so I think one of the things that we run into in this global pandemic situation is how do we collaborate better when we're physically removed? You know, there's the Teams meetings and there's teleconferences, but we've also got different time zones. Ideally, if we were in this, and we've done this before with other CMOs, we actually have folks physically in the site, person in plant, whether it's quality or technical, and where we find ourselves right now, that's not an easy thing to do. So, you know, the question would be, are there out of the box ideas or what kind of things maybe has this panel or other folks experienced when it comes to understanding there's to a certain extent, the person in plant and that physical touch or that personal touch and physically close to each other has a lot of benefit. So what are some ideas or strategies that people have used to kind of overcome that hurdle? Or do we sort of resort back to that model and you look at different ways to actually get people to the physical location? So I'm really curious in the panel's perspective on helping to solve that kind of a problem.
Hi, and thanks for joining us at Phacilitate Talks. I'm Michael Adenia, the Portfolio Director at Phacilitate.
And I'm Anthony Davies, the Founder and Chief Executive of Dark Horse Consulting Group.
And if you're joining us for the first time, Phacilitate Talks is a socially distanced talk show for the advanced therapies community, where Anthony and I are always joined by two fantastic guests to dig into the big issues for our community. And there's always a twist, isn't there, Anthony?
There is, Michael, always a twist.
And what is that twist?
I don't know. I just read that off my script. No, the twist is the twist is that this is an open forum, okay? And we do not over-rehearse. We systemically under-rehearse, partly because we're busy and disorganized, and partly because we want a candid exchange. So that's the twist for this week. Sorry about that, guess, if Michael didn't explain to you beforehand.
So rather than Anthony and I owning the stage and asking all the questions, it's over to our guests. And speaking of our guests, our first guest today has over 10 years experience commercializing stem cells and cell therapies. Her undergrad was in biology at the Karl von Ossietzky University, I hope I pronounced that right, in Germany, before moving to New York to do a master's in neuroscience, and quickly followed that up with a couple of postdoc projects in San Diego as well as Israel. She spent a lot of time on both sides of the Atlantic working for Lonza in the commercial development team in Basel, with the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult, our good friends in London, and the Centre for Regenerative Medicine in Edinburgh, Scotland as well, which I believe she calls her spiritual home. She joined Flow Design Sonics as Chief Commercial Officer back in 2018, and Flow Design was then acquired by MilliporeSigma in October 2019. Then there was a pandemic, and that brings us here to today. So Nina Bauer, welcome to the show. I'm also pleased that I get to call you a friend as well, which is awesome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be your friend.
And our second guest studied zoology as an undergrad, but saw an opportunity to also work for Lonza as a manufacturing technician in the last year of his studies, and went on to spend 7.5 years there working in process engineering and various other manufacturing roles. He then spent just shy of 8 years at Shire, mainly in management roles. That was definitely not intended. Mainly in management roles in engineering, quality assurance.
Don't do that again, Michael. Shire.
I can't believe that happened. Yeah. Just shy of 8 years at Shire, mainly in management roles in engineering, quality assurance, upstream manufacturing, and also championed continuous improvement. And today he's with Bluebird Bio, which he joined in 2018 and is 3 months into a new role as Associate Director of External Vector Manufacturing. Welcome to the podcast, Lance Holland.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate you having me and excited for this forum. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. And your job title isn't a fair reflection of your role, is it, Lance? Because vector manufacturing is only part of what you do from when we spoke. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, my role is a little bit more complex than that, but it's also exciting. I actually oversee or help support external manufacturing on the plasmid side of business, as well as the vector manufacturing. So we're sort of built in a way that we support certain CMOs in certain regions. And so I've got responsibility for some CMOs in the EU.
Nice. And on the plasmid side, Anthony, I texted you a few weeks ago and said, our research team, Phacilitate's research team, they do sort of agenda research and various kind of project research around various people in the industry. And a couple of them said to me that they shared some interesting things happening in the plasmid space and said, you guys should do a Phacilitate talks about this. And I texted Anthony and said, Anthony's plasmids, I think it's something we should be talking about. And you just sent in big capital letters, yes, and several exclamation marks. Why was that? We haven't talked about it since.
Yes. Yes is the answer. Look, Lance, your process is ridiculous because I think stupid is the vernacular. Stupid in the sense of being crazy, right? Rather than being stupid. So you are using plasmid as a critical raw material. Plasmid in itself is ridiculously complex, is a drug product in its own right in many historical trials and so forth. And you're using that as a critical raw mat for viral vector, okay, which is a critical raw material of enormous complexity, also drug product in its own right, in many trials and so forth, for your product. So you've got 3 levels of huge complexity and criticality. You've got ridiculously complex plasmid that's going into ridiculously complex viral vectors going to a ridiculously complex product, because cell therapy just isn't hard enough in the pure play sense of pulling stem cells out of the product. I don't know how you all orchestrate this stuff. It is so complicated, and plasmid sits right at the top of the food chain there. I think it's really, I didn't actually know that you have responsibility for plasmid as well as vector. I think that makes a ton of sense. So how's that all working out for you, having those 2 big things under your wing?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny, I actually started on the drug product manufacturing side and then just recently transitioned to the plasmid and the vector. There is a natural fit there. It does make a lot of sense, but it also does add a lot of complexity. And I think, but it's great, honestly. I mean, I love learning about it. I'm just getting started with the plasmid. I'd say I know the least amount about that, but it's great to hear you sort of say that there are 3 products in and of themselves, because it certainly feels that way.
Yeah.
It really is. There's a lot that goes into it. there's, you've got to disposition and release and do the QC testing on all of those. So yeah, we certainly don't have it's not easy, but it's exciting and it's been great, and just really cool to see kind of that entire life cycle, right? From the plasmid all the way through to drug product, and we get oversight and visibility into all of that. So for someone that's just now entering the cell and gene therapy space, I get a lot of visibility on the whole thing, and it's really exciting.
Do you also
I think,
get
Michael, one of the things, Michael, is the sourcing of plasmid. That's one of the things which we'll get stuck into down the road when we do that podcast.
Yeah.
It's a notorious, the field notorious for being dominated by a small number of players, plasmid supply, and there's a sort of row of nodding heads there from everybody. We all know a little bit about who we're talking about. I'm happy to defer there. I actually would be quite interested to bring Lance back for a few comments when we do the plasmid session, Michael. But we'll leave it there, I think, for now. Nina, you've orchestrated complex supply chains going all the way back to plasmid and all the way back down. What's it been like from where you sat, particularly earlier in your career at Lonza, where you and Lance both did time? That sounds like a jail sentence.
Well.
Right, sorry, Lonza.
No, when I was at Lonza, I was head of autologous cell therapy, which at the time was just on the cusp of starting in on the whole CAR T space. And during my entire time there, I always said, I'm glad I don't have to deal with viral vector manufacturing, which is my raw material, and that's all I need to worry about. And now I'm at MilliporeSigma in charge of viral vector manufacturing. So be careful what you say, because life usually turns against you on that one. But to be honest, it's been, similar to Lance, it's been a really interesting development for me to learn more about viral vector manufacturing and looking at things from that angle. But I can only confirm that plasmid supply is a continuous topic for everyone. And as you say, there's only a handful of manufacturers on that front. When I was at Lonza, the question was always, are you thinking of going in that direction? Can you supply that for us? And we usually said, no, thank you. And that is because it is just as complex as viral vector and cell therapy. And we already have those very, very complex products in our service offering, and adding another one isn't, I would say, from an industry perspective and from a commercial perspective, is not necessarily all that attractive, because cell and gene are inherently poor when it comes to margins as a manufacturer. Yeah. And that's looking back on the industry in general. It's very complicated, very hands-on, very manual. And so usually from what I've seen over my industry life cycle, it's just you pick one or two of the ones, but you don't want to go the whole hog.
Try and simplify it. You know what?
It's risk mitigation, really.
That reminds me. I posted something on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, just relating to this exactly. I was doing some desk research, and I found a comment around the fact that I think about a year ago, vectors made up 30% of the cost of goods for a CAR T therapy. And I asked the question a few weeks ago, what is it today? Because I know, as we all are aware, everyone is talking about vectors and producing them. Was 30% right in the first place, and has it changed up or down? Like, do either of you have an estimate in your head? You can obviously, speaking on behalf of yourselves as individuals rather than the companies you represent, but is 30% about right, and has that changed?
Was that from our paper?
I think it might have been a dark horse paper.
We published on this just over 2 years ago. No, 2.5 years ago we published on this.
Yeah, I think it might have been a statement from you, actually, Anthony.
Yeah,
I think about it.
We published a paper. I just went blah, 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 but we actually Katie Spink and Andrew Steinzappier from Dark Horse published a paper on this 2.5 years ago, essentially analyzing in all but name Yes-Carter COGS and the relationship between the pricing for those early CAR-Ts. And then to my ears, and I don't have any individuality, I sort of am Dark Horse, I guess. So personally and professionally, I think 30% sounds sort of spot on. Then and now, but I'd really be interested in hearing what Lance's sort of gut feel is for that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it's in the ballpark for sure. And it depends on, I was just going to say, it depends on the type of vector that you're talking about as well. There's different modalities to it. And then if you're factoring in the plasmid as well, right, I think it can go up or down from there for sure.
And just for the, just if we're all making disclaimers about our comments. I'm not a scientist in one way, in any shape or form. I am a conference organizer, but I like to talk about cost and money. And 30% does sound like a huge chunk. Are we trying to get that down? Is it, how can we get it down?
I mean, we're trying to look. If my other intro to Miami this year was that the field is sleepwalking into a COGS crisis. Okay, that one of the drawdowns of that paper we published was that the margins being pulled on Yescarta, Luxturna, and Kymriah were not only they were not excessive relative to margins being pulled by biologics and even small molecules and med dev, but in fact, for some of those early products and ones that have been licensed since that year when the 3 came on the market, margins are worse. And this just can't sit well with any fiscally responsible G&A division of a pharmaceutical or biotech company, because at the end of the day, you're going to go broke doing this. And we feel those price points were set as reasonable, in fact, almost humble multiples of the COGS. And that means the COGS is out of control expensive. And something has got to be done here, because otherwise we're cruising for a bruising, in the sense that a large indication like the one BioMarin's going for the ticket for later this year, and a few others, a large indication is going to get approved, and the price point is going to be set at a level which is just not compatible with healthcare economics. So I think your concern, I couldn't agree with you more, Michael. The pricing must come down. There's no way around that. And vector's a huge chunk of the pricing, and plasmid's a huge chunk of the vector pricing. So I mean, Lance, and with or without your MilliporeSigma hat on, Nina, you must both feel huge pressure to bring economies in, and I would just be interested in your perspectives on, is there any chance this is going to happen anytime soon?
I can, or go ahead, Nina. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, you've known me for a long time, so this has always been a topic for me, and this is independent of who I've worked for, but more in terms of what I do. And so, yes, we have done models around COGS, and the 30% sounds reasonable. It depends on how you evaluate COGS and what you count into it, right? How much of the manual labor do you count into it? Do you count testing and quality control into it or not, and things like that? So it'll shift.
We count it all in. We throw it all in. Absolutely, we do, because it's there.
But so with that said, there's obviously different levers that you can take, and yes, viral vector is one big chunk, but also manual labor is another massive one. So during my lifetime, we've always looked at automation and how can we make manufacturing more robust. The other thing is, while I love cell and gene therapy, and I will forever work in that space, I hope that I will not revisit that statement at a later stage. I always feel that we are also still ways away from really understanding our products well enough. and make and I think we have a chance of, once we really understand the mode of action and the biology, we can quality control much more significantly, and we might move to much smaller doses over time. I think that's where I'd like to always maintain a very holistic way of looking at COGS. And then, you know, you can always move into non-viral eventually and say, look, let's move away from this ultra complex viral raw material and see, is there something else like CRISPR or what else there may be that we can look at, right? And I think the industry is still in its infancy, and we've been saying that for the last 20 years, I'm sure. But it's going to happen next year or the year after or the year after. And but I think we're making progress every day.
And it's oh, sorry, go ahead, Lance. I know you had a couple of thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, no worries. No, I mean, I was just going to say that I agree with what Nina's saying. And I also will say that one of the things I love about Bluebird, and I know this is more on my behalf and not the company's, but, you know, we really are patient focused, and our priority is just to get a good quality product out. And we're not even really, and I know that we need to, and we will, but we're not even really focused on the cost piece. We're really just trying to make sure that we're doing putting our best foot forward in terms of the science and the manufacturing process and the quality control and the quality assurance. That's not to say that we're ignoring it, because what we are starting to do more and more is to really evaluate the ways of working and the efficiencies, and looking at KPIs and metrics, and really starting to measure ourselves about, you know, where we're currently at, and, you know, let those metrics drive improvements and opportunities and efficiency. And so COGS is obviously a part of that, and there's a recognition that we do need to drive that down. But there's a lot of other things that we also have to address and fix and make more efficient as well. And so that's kind of where a lot of our focus is. But yes, of course, you know, the goal is always to be to reduce those COGS so that we can provide more benefit to the patients in the long run. But where we're at right now is really just get a very good process put together and go commercial, and then let's work it out from there.
So a value to patients first approach is really where you guys are coming from. But also, I love the fact, what you're just saying there about sort of over time, you'll be measuring as you go on. But in your background, continuous improvement is something that I've seen on your CV in a couple of places as well. So is that something that you're always thinking about as well?
Yeah, you know, for better or for worse, I can't think any other way. I've always been interested in how do we do it better? How do we do it more efficient? And we all walk into a situation and you want to leave it better than the way that you found it. And certainly one of the ways to do that is to use data to drive decisions and drive improvements. So that's the beauty is that really we've all embraced that. And I think there's a lot of folks that have joined Bluebird from biologics or other, maybe, I don't want to say more mature, but longer track record commercial operations where you just don't know how to do it any other way. And it's, you know, how do we change the culture to really start to put data, and, you know, red doesn't mean bad. Red just means there's a problem. We've got to fix it. And so we're really getting good about visual dashboards and ways to sort of show us where the pain points are so that we can make it efficient. So, I mean, that's the way my mind works, but the beauty is that's the way a lot of people's mind works at Bluebird. And we recognize that we're sort of in our awkward teenage years to some extent, right? We know that we're on the precipice. We've got some commercial approval, but we also know that there's a long way to go and there's a lot of improvements to make. But it's awesome. I think across the board, there's a recognition, and we're really trying to optimize the way that we look at our data, look at our performance, and then want to improve it. That's always the goal.
Nice.
So I want to pick up on something you said there. I unashamedly refer to the biologics field, for example, as more mature and more commoditized than cell and gene therapy. I don't have any issue with, you know, as a teenager admiring adults. And I think we get exposed to that a tremendous amount with our late stage clients who are, you know, one side or the other of the BLA, MAA and approval. And regulators love great clinical data, but they do not give out any free passes in CMC or commercial operations, anything of that nature. And they are, I think correctly, extremely cut and dried in that regard. So I think Bluebird's strategy, as I see Jan's strategy unfold over the years of proactively hiring in, to overextend the metaphor, adults, is really going to pay off. I remember the time where in the 90s when Genentech went through hiring binges from GE, and not even GE Healthcare, GE, and the military, because both of those organizations knew the heck how to organize things.
Yeah.
And they had a strong respect for the chain of command and organizational structure. And, it was a phase, and it wasn't a perfect phase, but it definitely was instrumental in turning Genentech from a late-stage R&D company into a world-class commercial operation, which made them a good fit when Roche started increasing their equity position and ultimately acquired the whole thing. So I'm sort of unashamedly, I've loved growing up with cell and gene, but I think we need to look to these more mature industry segments, and your CPI experience, and when we see more and more, we're hiring more and more belted Six Sigma people into our organization, and we welcome that stuff.
Oh, nice. Well, let's dive into the meat of our show. And typical format is that each guest gets to ask a question, and then Anthony normally asks a question at the end as well. And why don't we kick things off, Lance, with you first and your question? What do you want to ask us?
Yeah, thanks. So to set it up a little bit before I ask the question, I'll explain a little bit about the position that I'm in and why I'm asking the question. So we're in the middle of doing process validation runs, PPQ runs for viral vector manufacturing. And, the process that we run, it's with a CMO. They're doing the actual manufacturing, and we're overseeing it as the sponsor. And they're in the EU and we're in the US, and everyone's homebound, right? And so I think one of the things that we run into in this global pandemic situation is how do we collaborate better when we're physically removed? There's the Teams meetings and there's teleconferences, but we've also got different time zones. Ideally, if we were in this, and we've done this before with other CMOs, we actually have folks physically in the site, person in plant, whether it's quality or technical. And where we find ourselves right now, that's not an easy thing to do. So, the question would be, are there out of the box ideas or what kind of things maybe has this panel or other folks experienced when it comes to understanding there's to a certain extent, the person in plant and that physical touch or that personal touch and physically close to each other has a lot of benefit. So what are some ideas or strategies that people have used to kind of overcome that hurdle? Or do we sort of resort back to that model and you look at different ways to actually get people to the physical location? So I'm really curious in the panel's perspective on helping to solve that kind of a problem.
This is a very, very cool question, especially, well, obviously, during these times, it's obviously put you guys in a very, very difficult position. What do you think, Anthony? Why don't you start?
I mean, Lance, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you're doing it. It's sort of the original nightmare. And we're living it too, through many of our clients. But there's only, if you've got to show up to work, you can't make viral vector in the spare bedroom, right?
Right.
We We've done a few things. One of the areas where it's hit us hard has been in the audit area. We do a lot of auditing, technical audits, quality audits, diligence audits, and so forth. We did put out a white paper on our website about virtual auditing, which I think our quality people did a terrific job on, and I really challenge them. One of the things we do is we ship GoPro cameras to the audit sites.
Oh,
and
wow.
during the audit, the people being audited wear the GoPro cameras, and it's sort of a bit weird. It's a bit sort of remote control-ish. Go to that filing cabinet, please. Pull out the file on blah blah blah. Open it. What do you have there? Let's see. PDF of that one, please. We'd like to take a closer look. That sort of thing. We also come up with the concept of provisional remote auditing, where we will do everything I just described, and then we will issue a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the audit. But in the context of a thumbs up, we make a mutual commitment between the two parties to receive a short in-person audit at the earliest next opportunity, and reserve the right to revoke any decision made during the remote audit. We do not believe that remote auditing will ever be sufficient, okay? But we also believe that you can't just, throw up your hands in despair. So that's the compromise we've brokered. And so far it's been well received. Haven't lost any GoPros yet. And that's a sort of rather feeble and trivial example of what we're doing. But I want to know how people who have, well, here's the thing for you and Nina, actually. So, standard SOP in a GMP facility is if you show up with a fever or the sniffles or an open cut or wound on you, you're out, okay? Go home and come back when you're better. Is it the same as that, only more stringent or drastic, or people suddenly actually pay attention to the SOP? What's going on in your experience? Not just you, but I know you all have friends in the business. What's going on there?
So for what I'll say is that we do still have folks at Bluebird that physically work in the labs, and so I think there's a whole there's checks and there's processes in place to make sure that people are healthy. And I think a lot of it's sort of self-reporting, but then there's also capability to, perform testing or have them go get testing. From a CMO perspective, I know each CMO is a little bit different. We've got quite a few in our network. And I think the common theme is, I think everyone takes it very seriously. And I think there's an element of, having to report if you have any of those symptoms. I'm sure, in some CMOs, they're actually doing temperature checks, and they're doing more physical checks on the site because they can control that versus, having someone self-report. So I think you get a mixture of different things depending on, the location and the environment and where they feel that they need to mitigate risk.
My team is field-based 100%, and so apart from the fact that most of them are very extrovert and they're climbing the walls, being holed up at home, we've been doing most of our work remotely through, just regular Zoom or Teams calls. We've also done evaluations of our equipment remotely, either by shipping equipment to customer sites and training them remotely by video, or customers sending us their cells and us running work in the labs. So we are, on the R&D development, as well as on the CDMO side, nothing stopped, but we staggered instead.
Really?
We're just staggered shifts.
You just say that, but the fact that nothing stopped, where it seemed half the world stopped.
No.
That's crazy.
But equally for our customers. So we continue working with our customers, and most of them are still working, right?
Nina, what was that specific example? I wanted to go into a bit more detail on it. With the first example you gave about shipping equipment one way or the other, describe to me what was the old normal and now what's the new thing you're doing exactly.
Okay, so the old normal in all my roles, company independent, has always been that we would take equipment to a customer site and a qualified person would demonstrate the equipment with regards to the customer process. So generate customer relevant data, but we would run it and demonstrate it and be hands-on, very much hands-on. Mainly because the equipment that I have commercialized over the last 5 to 6 years was always completely new to the market, completely different to what has been out there. So you can't just ship something and say, okay, here's a new electroporator or a new PCR machine or whatever it was, and read the manual and we'll do some training online, right? It was a lot more involved. And so that obviously doesn't work right now. We've done a little bit of work with customers who already had equipment where we needed to do in-person interventions. Do an annual maintenance visit or something like that. And that was ultra regulated in terms of industry standard, I think, at the moment, where you need to adhere to the hosting customer sites, health and safety regulations. You need to square them off with your own and say, okay, they're overlapping. You track, you get a briefing up front on who are you going to meet. You get names so you can track and trace if needed. And then you need sign off from above that you're okay to go. But yeah, it's just been very, very tightly controlled if we go out. But internally, the industry has such a high demand for progress right now. You can't stop, right?
Yeah, I think that's the theme we were talking about before we got started, right, Michael? Is we can't just stop.
Yeah.
We learn these skills. And
I also think that the other scenario you mentioned, Nina, was also quite interesting. Was that another scenario of where the typical scenarios you say your technology would be on site at a customer, but you mentioned that the customer is now potentially sending back the cells to you?
Yeah, we had that.
Which must create a whole bunch of additional dilemmas, because you probably didn't originally have capacity for them anyway. Like, where did you just find that capacity from?
I mean, I think if we have learned one thing over COVID, all of us in the biotech industry, is that, creativity wins. And so you just look at what your capabilities are, you look at what your capacity is, and you make it work. I mean, we used VR glasses at some point, and some of our colleagues I know are using them for virtual quality visits and facility validations and things like that. And they're actually quite cool because you can directly interface with it and direct the wearer to look at something specific, and it's as if you're there in person, but it also monitors and records all the steps that you have done.
Yeah.
The part that I'm absolutely have no clue about is how does that work from a regulatory perspective? Does that even mean anything, or is it a nice checkpoint? But in order to actually get fully validated facilities, etc., I'm not sure the regulators have fully caught up with that. But I mean, yeah, this industry right now has massive opportunity to be creative.
Nina, my neighbor, literally my next door neighbor, is in sales for Google Glass. And he's been buried with work.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I think you've raised a really interesting point in questioning the compliance, because and establishing the veracity of a Google Glass or whatever it is download. Obviously, there's opportunity for impropriety there, or even criminality. When stakes are high, but I think Michael knows this because we had this conversation on a regular basis, and it's my belief that in a few years' time, less will have changed as a result of this pandemic than we may, in the deepest dark of night, think will change. I think things will go back to a situation which is much closer to how they were before the pandemic than anything else, but some things will change. And maybe VR technologies like Google Glass and others, and I'm sorry, I'm maligning all of Google's competitors by omission here, maybe this is that. Maybe this is part of their moment.
And I know a chap out of King's College. We talked about King's College last week as well, didn't we?
Yeah.
But there's a chap out of King's College that's looking at new technologies, and they're using VR for extremely difficult operations, surgery from from different parts of the world. So a highly skilled surgeon can perform a very technical operation completely remotely with VR, and as you say, the gloves as well. That is actually using those gloves to handle the tools on a site that might be several thousand miles away. So if
we looked at exactly that when I was still in Scotland, for remote parts of Scotland, how do you service them? I mean, at the time it was just due to the remoteness, but I think we may
Scotland.
We may come in leaps and bounds now, thanks to COVID, where this is becoming the new normal, and where the technologies will just make a massive jump in terms of what they can do and what we can do. And I think remote areas of Africa, remote areas of wherever will ultimately really benefit, or hopefully can benefit from this.
No, I think you're right, Nina. I think some things will change. I have to go back though. Lance, you're doing PPQs in Europe and you can't be there. That must be killing you. I mean, I just can't imagine. I'm a control freak at the best of times. I just can't imagine.
I'm a self-admitted control freak as well, so it is very difficult. But and I think you guys touched on some of the things that we're looking to do, and I think it's been a trial by error, and just the more I'll just say that the perspective is evolving, right? And I think one of the things that we're looking to do is kind of this virtual person implant, right? Where it wasn't GoPro, but I really like that idea, because what we're looking to do is maybe have tablets or something set up so it's on the manufacturing floor, and our folks can actually be there and to observe the operations and be able to talk to people directly, because that's really the piece that you miss, is being able to visually see it, being able to help troubleshoot and to be able to talk to people directly and kind of help solve technical issues or whatever it is. So that's really been the key challenge. And so we are looking to do the virtual person implant. But I hadn't considered the GoPro as a really cool way to do it, because you actually get to see the operator's perspective. That's really cool.
There's a combination of those two, though. That ISCT at one of their conferences, they use these basically like these robots, right? That like a little R2D2 that has a tablet face that could be your face, and then arms, and then you can remote control it from your home over to your the conference round table that you want to be attending. But
I'm going to put one of those in your office right now, Michael.
Sorry?
I'm going to put one of those in your office right now.
And Anthony's just always over my shoulder.
Anthony robot wandering around. That'll go down well. No, I mean, actually, all joking apart, they have those things in some airports. They have them in Incheon Airport in Korea, and you can ask it where your gate is and scan your ticket and where can I get a burger or whatever. And I had to begrudgingly admit it sort of kind of works. And these little chappies are running around the airport trying to help people. And it'll even allow you to get your photograph taken.
Creativity out of necessity.
We went with GoPro. You know why I went with GoPro? Because everyone's kids got one. I mean, it was as simple as that. So tons of people know how to use them. We could have gone with fancier ones or more sophisticated ones. And again, I apologize for the specific brand mention. But GoPro is almost like Kleenex. It's sort of a synonym for those camera things you put on your bike helmet, right?
Right.
And it was as simple as that, because there is an adoption issue with this new technology, okay? And you've got to reduce, we felt you have to reduce that as low as possible for this even to have a chance of working. We like it.
They're really simple. I've got one as well. But I should officially say that this episode is not sponsored by GoPro or Google.
What do you mean? It's time to go pro, Michael.
Yeah.
Enough of this amateur stuff.
Look, conscious of time, I think we should bring on our next question. So our next question is, and thank you very much, Lance, for that first question. As you can see,
I'm
it
sorry
got
about
us
your
quite
PPQs.
heated. It got us thinking of science fiction and thinking of the future, which is really, really cool. So thanks for that question. Nina, over to you.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a gear changer in terms of question. So my question is, I'm fairly new to the US. I moved here again after I've been here before, but I moved here about 2 years ago. And I think we've already touched on COVID and the situation right now in terms of remote working. But another thing that as a non-US person in the US has kind of occupied my mind over the last 6 months or so is this question about diversity and inclusion, and what I as an individual can do in that space. And it kind of got triggered obviously by recent events and what's going on in the industry as a whole, or in society as a whole, I should say, but also in terms of when I look at when I recruit and the kind of applicants that come across my table, I have to admit that it's a very male white mix of people. I'm not saying they're not qualified. It's just staggeringly I would just say monotonous. That sounds wrong, but you get where I'm going. Yeah. So I started looking into this, and you and I have talked about this in the past, and I've kind of also reached out to various friends to say, what can I do to get a broader applicant audience, so that I can at least be assured that my ads go out in the right direction and are seen by the right people. And then it's on me, obviously, to take it further at that stage. But how can I at least get over that hump? And one of the things that I was confronted with, and it's a little bit new to me being here in the US. I've not really seen it in that extreme version elsewhere, was that a lot of people told me, well, you don't come across as inclusive and diverse as a company. And I have to very strongly state that I'm speaking as an individual here and not on behalf of my company. But I was also made aware that, unless you can demonstrate that you have senior people of color and diverse members of staff very openly visible, you will have a very hard time attracting talent. And so for me, this is a chicken and an egg question. I don't know how to break it, really. So my question to you, any thoughts, recommendations and things that I can do better to do my part as an individual?
That's, you're right. Like, of the two things that are dominating our world right now, it's dealing with COVID and also the recognition after the death of George Floyd that, there are several industries, sectors, and pockets of community that have been underrepresented when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and many organizations that could be better. And the conference industry is definitely one of them, and in terms, and as well as the life science community as well, and the biotech community. So I hear that problem that you're talking about, Nina. It must be sort of almost frustrating to an extent that you're trying and you want to create as much opportunity as possible, and that, I suppose, to an extent, that's where it starts, isn't it? You want to create the opportunity rather than you can't manipulate the results, but you can create the opportunity as best as you can. And I suppose it starts there. And it's something that it's no secret that we can't recruit right now. So the conference industry is definitely not going through growth right now. But when we do start to, I know that our organization is looking at making significant changes in how bias is removed from that recruitment process, for sure. But one thing that I thought about quite a lot is, well, are we looking in the right places to create those opportunities as well? So, yeah, I suppose that might be, maybe that's somewhere to start is, what's everyone got to share around, looking in the right places. And, Lance, I know that, one of the, I love Bluebird Bauer because for some reason, I just absolutely associate them with inclusion and diversity and bringing young people from underprivileged backgrounds to get a glimpse of what's happening in this industry as well. So I'm not sure, have you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do have some thoughts, and you're right. I think Bluebird, one of the things that attracted me about Bluebird is that they were so sort of out in the front and really seeking that. And it was very obvious through, social media and just sort of the way that Bluebird, I don't want to say marketed itself because it's actually all legit and real, and it's really what we at Bluebird are striving to do is to draw people in from many different diverse backgrounds, diversity across a lot of different spectrums. And so I think you have to be really intentional about it. You have to let people know that you're seeking it. Obviously, right now in this environment, I think a lot of people are trying to strive for that. But I don't think that you necessarily have to have senior leaders that have a certain, profile or a different diversity. I think that helps certainly, but I think a commitment to be heading in that direction speaks volumes too. So it sounds like you're doing that. The other thing, I think, Michael, you're right in that you've got to be seeking out and looking in the right places. I think that's another aspect of it. I know Mass Bioed, they've been doing work. We call it career ambassador. I actually serve as a career ambassador for them, and they're actually starting to partner with historically Black colleges. That's just one, segment of diversity, to let people know in life sciences degrees that biotech is even out there. For me, I stumbled upon it, quite honestly. I was a zoology major. I didn't really know what biotech was, but it came through networking and talking to people, and I learned about it. So I think going out there and letting people know what's out there in the industry to the places where there is diversity certainly helps. I think that's one. On the bias perspective, one of the things that we're starting to talk about are certain folks within Bluebird Bio. A colleague of mine brought this up, and it was a really good idea. Her name is Diana Roses, and we're talking about applicants, right? And there's a measure of bias just when you see names and you see colleges and things like that. But one of the things we've talked about is, should we take the name off of the applicant and you're just looking at the resume, not knowing what the name is? And how much bias would be eliminated just on something like that, where you actually can't tell gender, you can't tell, right? So you can't tell male, female, etc. You don't know the names, you don't know nationality, you don't know any of those things. You're just looking at the merits of the applicant alone. And I thought that was a wonderful idea. It's another way to, that doesn't help solve the diversity problem, but it certainly helps with the bias and not forming bias.
And I think that's a really, I think there's the diversity challenge of, can we be a more diverse organization or community or sector? And then obviously, removing that bias. Just on the topic of, can we be more diverse? I also, as a conference organizer and working in the life science space, I do think about what does the makeup and of our conference audience look like, and our speaker panels, and even the panels on a podcast like this, for example. And Lance, you mentioned that it's got to be quite deliberate, and that's kind of like where equity comes into play, rather than saying that you're diverse, but not actually being absolutely deliberate about with your actions around that. So again, once we're allowed to start organizing conferences again, we've made a few baby steps in being really deliberate in what we want our panels to look like. And our production team that invites speakers, they've made a deliberate commitment to having a 40% female lineup. And we're also committing to a number of what our agendas look like in terms of people of color as well, so that we are sort of having we know where we were in previous years, and we actually have a goal of where we want to go to. Because one thing that I was thinking about was, what can you imagine if, and I don't know whether biotechs have asked themselves this, but if we were to go a year of biotech inviting their senior staff and handpicking who goes to which conferences and so forth, and they looked back and did an audit at the end of the year of what was the makeup of the people that we gave conference tickets to come to events, and if they looked at the lot of the 300 grand they may have spent on conference passes, and the couple of hundred people they sent all around the world to enjoy these great experiences, was that a fair reflection of, were they giving opportunity and equity to the people that are normally underrepresented? So, for a couple of years now, we've invited free of charge, working with colleges to invite people to come to our conferences from an undergrad, from undergrads from diverse backgrounds, to just come and enjoy the conference content, to get exposure to this industry, to start building their network from a very young age, and recognize that there are opportunities there for them as well. And it's something that I would like to challenge biotechs and large organizations to really think about when they start selecting, and chat, question, with those 5-6 conference passes you're buying, who are they going to, and what is it that you're trying to achieve from that, and really sort of question that. It's probably quite it's definitely controversial, but I think I've got a platform where we can actually use that to make a difference, rather than just the typical way of getting the CEO and the heads of departments to represent the agendas. But is there something that can we be better in that regard?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of really interesting points there I'd like to draw out. On the sort of what you're saying, Lance, about strenuously trying to remain agnostic to bias by name or gender or apparent nationality. We had a really good experience recently hiring for a senior G&A position using LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, when you buy into their recruiting system, will sieve your candidates with acceptance criteria that you write out. And those acceptance criteria we wrote as X years experience doing Y, linguistics, ability to, legality to work in where we want them to work, and so forth. And that was a very, that was a machine doing it. And we had no visibility into the people's names. We didn't even see the ones which didn't make the cut. And the resulting, we got 37 qualified candidates for the position we were looking for, and it was a diverse group. And for what it's worth, we ended up hiring a non-white woman for that position. Historically, I like to make another call. I like to call out Jan Leslie. Okay, if there's an organization with the good attitude that you describe at Bluebird, it does come down from the top. Okay, and I think if you've ever spent any time with him at all, it's pretty clear that he cares about the stuff you should care about. Yep. So there's a free prop for your boss there. I think we've been lucky at Dark Horse. We've had, our board is 60% non-white or non-male, and it's just great. I turned down a very senior woman. She turned herself down because, ironically, she got promoted so high within her organization that she couldn't join our board anymore, which I thought was a bittersweet moment. But I think that Michael, also you can't argue with the facts. You have to make it. You have to go out there and proactively make it work. You can't put institutional bias back in any direction. It's for a sustainable solution. It's got people's capabilities have got to stand on their own merits. And I've said from day one, Dark Horse is a vigorous meritocracy with no ceilings at any level, glass or otherwise.
One thing that I would like to pick up on what you just said, Anthony, and that is that this woman was promoted so high that she couldn't join you, and that is one thing that I have heard from members of the community when I reached out. It is like there are very few candidates that often fit the bill of what you're recruiting for, and they're in such high demand, but there's not the breadth of applicants and talent, and hence it's really difficult, even if you have a person that might be a perfect fit, to then actually recruit. And I'm not sure I fully agree with that, but I think one of the points that was made when I kind of reached out to other people and talked about this was we need to start a lot earlier and build more of a grassroots that then grows up into a diverse community that can then feed into the higher positions. And Michael and I talked about that a little bit, and I think having conference attendance of undergrads or even graduate students to even expose them to the industry and see what they can do. I didn't have that, and I took the most circuitous route into where I am right now. Because I never saw it, right? And I can only imagine. And I'm privileged in the sense of, I'm highly educated and had all the opportunities that anyone could ask for. I can only imagine how hard it is for somebody who doesn't have those opportunities, where it already starts with, if I go to college, it needs to be to study something that will make enough money so I can pay my college education and can pay off my debt. That is not something that I'm personally familiar with, because I had free university education. I never had to pay for anything. I came out with a PhD and an MBA without a dime of debt, right? And so those are hurdles that for me as a non-American are just difficult to understand, and I'm slowly grasping them. But it means that when Michael and I talked, if we talk about conferences for starters, should we not talk about how we as a silver or gold sponsor for Phacilitate, for example, should automatically always sponsor 2 tickets, including travel, for a student from a minority background?
Yeah,
just to open up those doors.
So there you have it. That's the end of part 1. And as you can tell, we really got into the topics there and ran out of time for Anthony to get to ask his question. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. And if you did, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, share this episode with your friends in your network, and of course, sign up to become a member at facilitate.co.uk/membership. Our members get access to exclusive content every 2 weeks, and you also get discounts at our events whenever we can run those again. So now that's all for this week, and we'll see you again for part 2. Thank you.